right, and hello, good day, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Merged Worlds, the Dungeons and Dragons story podcast. Today's episode is live here on YouTube, but will also be available up on iTunes, Spotify, and everywhere you get audio podcasts. This is the first episode we've had in a couple of months. It's been a very eventful time. Lost my job, got a new job, had to go through training, had a cat pass away. There's a lot of things that unfortunately have kept me from being able to focus and get any writing done, but things are back normal now, so should start being able to see these episodes coming out every couple of weeks. Sometimes they'll be pre-recorded, sometimes they'll be live. It's going to depend on schedule, but I'm going to do my very best to make sure we get them out on a regular schedule either way. And yes, just to answer chat, if you're looking, I did dye my hair because of our Extra Life charity stream we had. One of the goals were met, so I did all the coloring. So yes, I'm very bright and colorful right now if you're watching this live on YouTube. So this is going to be episode 108 of this podcast. Whew, that's a long one. Over 300 hours of story at this point, which is a lot of talking. Clearly, Draven does not know when to shut up. But we're going to start today, as we always do, with a bit of a recap, especially since it's been a while. We're going to do a little bit more in depth of a recap than normal, and then we're going to go into this week's episode. Before I do, I would like to say thank you to everybody who watches or listens to this. If you don't mind, if you're on any of the podcast networks and you want to give us thumbs up or 5 stars or all the hearts or whatever it is, I would greatly appreciate it. If you're on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe the video. And if you know someone out there who you think might like the story, please share it with them. I'm not asking you to tell everybody you know, but if there's one person out there you think might enjoy the content, it would be awesome if you wouldn't mind sharing the news. Definitely trying to get as many people who enjoy this as possible. Other thing I'm going to mention, because it is Dungeons and Dragons based and it is tied up, I have just recently gotten into 3D printing, and I've designed something I've been wanting to make for years because it's something that I've had in my own D&D group that my players really enjoy using, and it's something that I'm going to be positioned to be able to have available. They're specialty 6-sided dice, obviously a little larger than normal dice, and one of them is a critical hit dice and one is a critical fumble dice. So when I play a D&D, if somebody rolls a natural 20, which is a critical hit, they get to roll the critical hit dice to see what type of special effect they have. If they roll a 1, it's a critical fumble. They roll the other dice to see what special effect it has. Always DM discretion, of course. Sometimes what you roll just may not be pertinent to the thing you're doing. For example, sever a limb. If you're fighting something that has no limbs, that's not going to be real helpful to you. So on and so forth. Drop weapon on the fumble dice. You're not using a weapon. You're not going to drop your hand if you're in a fist fight. So obviously, of course, can customize those for your play. But they've always been very popular. My community, my groups that I've played with, always look forward to getting to pull out the special dice when they roll a natural 1 or 20. It just adds a little bit of extra fun to the game. These will be coming out here real soon on my website, Onlydraven.com. Going to be different colors. Like I said, I'm still working out exact sizes, and I'm looking for a way to color the lettering in, kind of like you'd see on traditional dice. I'm still relatively new to it, but I'm excited. They should be up soon. I'm also going to be attending a gaming convention called Fanboy Expo in Knoxville, Tennessee on March 9th and 10th. I'll have a booth there. I was kind of talking about this, D&D and the podcast, as well as the YouTube streaming side of the videos and such. So if you're in the area, love to have you visit. Okay. Now that I've gotten all that out of the way, let's get into the story. Oh, hello there, Mr. Terry. Popped in to see there. I appreciate it, sir. Let's go ahead and talk about what we were doing. So, where we last left off in the story, we were dealing with the group that consists of Artis, Maeve, Petal, Ran, and Kip. Okay? They had reached an area traveling east after trying to catch up with Seraph, Deacon, and Mugen, trying to help their friends. They came into this area that they learned was in dark times, I guess the easiest way to say. Warned a bit from continuing, but they decided they were going to keep going in there, so they felt pulled to that. And Quintius, the magical scepter, the intelligent artifact that Artis carries, tells them that that's the direction that they need to go. He doesn't know why, he only knows that that's the direction they have to go. As they begin traveling through those lands in the middle of the night, they're attacked by a vampire. They manage to defeat it, because as we remember, Petal, who is a half-kender, half-human wild mage, her parents are two world-famous hunters of the undead, so she was raised with training, she has experience, and as a group, they were able to take out the vampire. They continued traveling on until they got to the primary city of this country, and made their way in town. And this is where they learned that while the land is ruled by a senate, if you will, of 13 individuals chosen by the noble houses and the different merchants guilds and such, the true power lies in the Church of the Night, also known as the Children of the Night. They worship a goddess who is known as the Lady of the Night, the moon goddess, things of that. She has several different names, as many gods would. And that the worshipping of all ancient gods, which are the traditional gods that everyone knows in Mergeworlds, that are custom, obviously, is basically outlawed. And any who do worship them end up disappearing or some way or another end up getting accused of a crime, different things of that nature. So they show up, of course, openly, Artis being a cleric and Maeve being a paladin, and enter into town. They are greeted by a couple of higher clerics of the Children of the Night, who definitely are very, oh yeah, come on in, favorable. People kind of look unfavorably on what they consider the old gods, because people believe that the old traditional gods abandoned them, and all the woes on the land were caused by that, until the Children of the Night showed up with their religion and kind of worked their way in control. Now, the Children of the Night in no way are advertised as an evil god or goddess in this situation, or an evil church. They just believe the light of the moon is leads, and so on and so forth. And basically, the moon is the light in the darkness, right? That's the light that cuts through evil, is kind of the way to do it, which is still the same basic concept of the traditional gods, right? Because the primary god is the goddess of light, then there's the god of darkness, and they're diametrically opposed. But they're all invited in, hang out. They make their way there. They're spending time. They get an inn. They start making their way around town. They do some shopping. Very often in the story, I've had people ask about this. It's like every time somebody goes somewhere, the first thing they do is go shopping. Why is that? And, if you're playing D&D, man, here's a great hint. It's the best way to get information, right? If you're playing D&D and you're a group, you're a PC, and you enter a town that has a marketplace or general stores or a tavern, right? Everybody goes to the tavern, but a place where you can go and spend money. That's the easiest way to get people to talk to you. To open up to you is by filling their pockets, but through legitimate business. They're here spending. Maybe they're buying a little more than they should. They're not haggling. They're paying asking price. That earns goodwill with people. So it's a very easy way to get gossip and get information from the area while still earning goodwill. My players very quickly learn that's a great way to do it, and in real life, it's the same thing. If you ever go to a community market, man, you can find all about the neighbors and people at the community market or community garage sale. It's just based on fact. So they do the same thing. They go there, they're trying to earn some goodwill, they're trying to learn about the city and exactly what the problem is here. Because they believe it's the Children of the Night. They know there was a vampire, and they're concerned that there may be others. Are they in league? Are they not? Is it two completely different forces fighting for control of this area? They're not sure. So they're really just trying to get as much information as possible. That night, when they settle down in the inn that they're in, a man basically knocks on the door, and they open the door and immediately realize he's not what he seems to be. I won't say tackle him, but Maeve gets her giant minotaur hands on him, only to learn that he is himself a cleric of the old gods himself, and that he's come to warn them that they're in grave danger. The Children of the Night will not like that they're there, and if they go to the actual church, there's a chance they're going to disappear, if you will. I'm using air quotes for those of you in audio podcast. Using a lot of air quotes today. I'll talk about it. So they end up getting information from this other cleric, who they can tell is a true cleric. That's clerics can tell clerics, and they make a deal to basically arrangement for him to help them basically get away to a safer place the following evening. Spend another day hanging around town, figuring out what they can, and then that night they split up, gang, and make their way to an underground chamber. It's off the sewers. They don't like being in the sewers because the sewers is how they believe like the vampires and creatures are moving about the city, especially during the day. But it's hard to hide a minotaur. Maeve desperately stands out. You're gonna hear that a lot. And so they have to do what they can to get her there. They get her to a safe place where they meet up with the other clerics of this group, of this faction of true clerics that are there to, that wants their help in taking back the country from the fake goddess of children of the night. Okay. The last thing we learned is that the primary cleric, the one that leads the group, his name is Vanessa Starbreeze. She's an older lady, and she is a cleric of the goddess of death. So that kind of catches them by surprise, right? Because technically she would be considered an evil cleric or a cleric of darkness, the second in rank of the evil gods behind Elazon, god of darkness himself. Helana is the goddess of death, so very not popular in the positive sequence. And so they're basically told, hey, not only am I part of this group, she runs this group because we all have common ground. And basically, the only way we're going to have a chance of doing any of this is by working together. So that's kind of where we left off and where we're going to start. It's going to be that meeting now that they've met and what happens from that. Okay, so let's jump back a little bit more in depth intro than normal, just because it's been so long. So I apologize. All right, so we're going to start with a little bit of reading here, and we'll move our way in. The companions and the clerics sat around the table in the hidden sewer room, where they're staying. It's a large chamber, dry, clean. It's not stinky down there. It's used as a meeting place by these people. There's a table, chair. They brought some snacks. Several of the clerics who arrived, but it's not like a well-decorated room by any means. Vanessa, cleric of death, sat directly across from Artis. You can imagine Artis in the middle, her friends beside her, then the other clerics, with Vanessa, the leader, cleric of death, right across from them. Is it really so surprising, asked Vanessa. It is not impossible for servants of the light and servants of the darkness to work together towards a common goal. It is, after all, up to each of us to maintain the balance. So the balance is very important, right? Because too much light, you think, oh, we want good to try to destroy all darkness. It doesn't work like that. You can't have light without darkness. It's a 50-50 thing. These things exist. Death itself is natural and not necessarily always a bad thing. If you lived a long life, you die of natural causes. I mean, that's just a part of the cycle of life, just as light and darkness is. So there is a balance there. And while there may be some gods and so on and so forth that strive to take over the world or to eliminate the enemies or try to get whatever, the primary, what are known as the elder gods, the goddess of light, god of darkness, and then the god of neutrality is the god of the gray god, the middle neutral gods. He is the god of knowledge, because it requires both. They're about maintaining the balance. There's an understanding there, where they may oppose each other and fight for control of certain things, but neither one is trying to eliminate the other. Not always said about the gods beneath them in that hierarchy. But I continue. But why would one who worships death want to help these people? Asked Ran, rather smugly. You got to remember, Ran has a very noble, black and white version of the world, right? I'm a servant of nobility, so on and so forth. There's good, there's evil, destroy evil. He's much more black and white than the rest of the group. Do not be a fool, said Vanessa. The worship of death does not mean the extermination of all life. For without life, death cannot exist. And you think about that, right? If you kill everybody, no one else will be born to then die, right? it all comes down to what does death mean in a setting like this, right? In a D&D kind of setting, right? It's much like any other type of religion. It's all about where's the soul go, right? Everybody believes that in death they are going to go to where their God is, to live in their version of heaven or the afterlife. And this is the outer realms of this reality. The primary, there's the seven heavens and the seven hells. And so, it's all about where do you end up at the end of the day. There are also things like the elemental planes and things like that that exist, which are very neutral areas. But the seven heavens and the seven hells are where it's said that the gods live, and you would go to where your god is and serve. If you're a high rank servant, like you're a high cleric of some kind, or you're a very devout worshiper, or maybe you're just chosen by the god and you do a great service, the hope is that you will then become one of their servants, like hands-on, right? Maybe not necessarily to come back or reincarnation, which can exist depending on which god they follow here. But that's very often where the gods' servants, whether you call them angels or whatever, might come from. Those souls who have proven themselves in life to be very devout and very loyal, and then get to continue in the next life. For anyone to get to that, they have to die. Right? For your soul to go on to the good heaven, you still have to experience death. I'm sure there's in D&D some exceptions to that rule, but primarily you have to die for your soul to go to where you're going to go, right? And if this in this fantasy setting. So Helena, goddess of death, it's not all about, hey, I want to kill everybody, but very often you pass through her realm to get to where you're going to go. Some people don't get to go any further. And some people choose not to go any further, such as her followers and her loyal. For a cleric who worships death, getting to die is the greatest reward, right? Because that means at this point your goddess has decided it's your time to come home. You have served me well, and you get to come home now. That's the positive side. The downside is, if you failed her and she causes death, it's because she wants to get her hands on you quicker so you can begin the torment for eternity. So, you're really walking a thin line there with how you're serving the goddess of death. But all must pass through death to move on to their next designation of existence. So, for that job to exist, for souls to continue to pass through, life has to exist. There has to be life beget life for death to continue. Death understands this, as does Tavian, god of life and healing. Like the elder gods, there's that understanding of we can't eliminate each other. There's no eliminating death, because if you eliminate death, no soul can get to then serve their gods in the next existence. So it's again, fine line the gods have to walk there, because they do fight. There are things they fight over control of, whether it be areas or artifacts or people, or maybe even specific souls for reasons. That battle exists, but neither tries to exterminate the other, because both are required for each to exist. So I know it's a little deep in the hierarchy of this. You're going to see as we move further into Mergeworlds, there's a lot more to the hierarchy and the way gods and souls exist and how they connect than I've really talked about before, because it becomes much more important to the story as we proceed. So we are going to learn a little bit more about the afterlife, the next life, and what happens depending on who or what you believe as we move forward in the story. So this is just a taste of that today, but I wanted to explain that, because death does not always necessarily mean evil. Okay? So she says, without life, death cannot exist. And besides, she continued, with the stranglehold the children of the night have over the people, no one is able to worship the true gods, which my lady will not tolerate. Our clerics were some of the first to be targeted by the children, and the first to be blamed for the people's misfortunes. Which makes sense, right? You're always going to blame it on the evil clerics first, right? What? But in some situations, some cities and some nations and such, worshipping of death and the passing of death is again not a bad thing. It's something to be respected, right? And so in some areas, gods or clerics of this nature can operate openly and freely. But if someone's coming in saying, oh, hey, these clerics that have failed you and the gods that have failed you, you're going to start with the evil ones. Because already most people are going to be a little bit nervous about them anyways, right? These guys are, and they're heroes, right? While not happy about the thought of a cleric of working with the cleric of death, Artus was much more understanding. Whatever the reasons, our motivations align, said Artus. So allies, of course, we will be. Still, I will admit I have my concerns. Let us pray that my faith will not be tested. Vanessa smiled. It is good to see such wisdom in one so young. My confidence in our chances have increased. The children are well organized and powerful, and we are vastly outnumbered, and our resources are very limited. Still, we have something they don't, something that will give us the edge. And what is that? Asked Kip. Why, our faiths, replied Tilden. Tilden was that first cleric who brought them here. Whatever it is the children worship, it is not a true God. It cannot stand up against the power of our faith. The companions looked at each other, sharing concerned looks, and a glance at Vanessa could see she too found Tilden's words a bit naive. What do you know of them? Asked Petal, these children of the night. Anything you could tell us would be helpful. So we've touched on some of the things and what's happened. I've already talked about in the past how on the world that this land was from, clerics were basically stripped of the ability to use their powers. Doesn't necessarily mean they can't use their powers, but they are forbidden to do so by the gods. The people become complacent, became demanding, and expected the gods to basically serve them. The gods are like, we don't play that. Gotta learn a lesson? Fine, you're on your own for a little while. And of course, that unfortunately opened the door for the children to slip right in there. The cleric, the children, the religion and the Church of the Night has only been in the area for probably about 15 to 16 years at this point, in control. There was the beginnings of it maybe before that, where things were starting to wiggle their way and little tendrils into the community with the first few, but it really didn't start coming to power and prominence until about 15 to 16 years earlier. They know that the worship itself is some form of a female deity, or deity, I'm going to pronounce that. It was like I said, between 15 and 20 years ago, they first showed up. With 15 years, they've been in power. As to a name of the goddess, they don't ever say one. They've never given it, only Lady of the Night, Mistress of the Night, She of the Moon, the different types of names you would find. A lot of times nicknames are for different gods and goddesses, but no specific name. Like she's not Lisa, the cleric. You know what I mean? It's not like that. Mark, god of strength. It's not like that. It's no specific name, more of just a title. And so if there is a name, although it is whispered rumors that there is, only the highest of ranked clerics of the Church of the Night know it, and even they would be hesitant to speak it. Okay? It's important. Back when this first started happening, the children were coming into power. Again, it started with disappearances, right? People of power, maybe not magical power, but just power, authority, people of, like the clerics and such, started to disappear, just be gone one day. House not ransacked or anything, it's just like they just got up and left. And some probably eventually did. As it became dangerous to live there, obviously, some people felt, hey, I better get out while I still have the choice. But in the beginning, people started to disappear without any sign. No bodies were ever found, nothing to imply something ill happened to them. But it was strange, and very often these were not people who would have just got up and left in the middle of the night without taking, the things that they value, right? And you could say, kidnapping and criminals, and I'm sure there's a thieves guild, as there is in every city. How big or small it is, the clerics don't have a lot of knowledge. It's not something that they have access to. But there's one, at least there is one that exists. This went on for years, became more and more prominent, where more powerful people who felt that they were immune or would not be threatened like this, they too started to disappear, and there became whispers and concerns. And at the same time, more and more of the whispers and rumors started to spread through the land, the several cities, including this primary main city we're in right now, Havenscrest, of the reasons why there was so much misfortune, why crops weren't growing like they used to, why there was hunger, why there was more poverty. And these rumors all kept pointing to the inaction of clerics and the gods and so on and so forth, which the people already had some irritation with, right? This all kind of came to head to the night of the mage fire. Okay? The city had a small mage school, magic school. Mages existed, but they weren't like an overly domineering force in this area. But there were some who studied magic and had magic abilities. And the mage school one night in the middle of the night caught on fire, and everyone within died. Now, it was very commonly believed that someone casting a spell or messing with things they shouldn't have probably caused the fire, which is not out of the realm of possibilities. But when the building went up in flames, no one survived, even though there were several mages in there of adequate power who could have or should have been able to have an effect, at least enough to get themselves, if not a few other people, out of there. Yet no one survived. The only mage that was left in the city at that point was a mage known as Luthien the Longbeard. Luthien did not live in the school. In fact, he had his own tower on the other side of the city. He'd been there a very long time and was known to be a mage of fairly high power. As the children of the night and the church of the night began to, at that point, start rumors, at least this is what they're saying, this is what these clerics are saying. We believe it was them who started them, but the rumors began that he was part of it, that he'd eliminated the other mages because he feared them or they were coming to take his power. There was some type of an argument between them, and so he was wiping out his competitors. And, you know, people had friends and family that were mages. Some of those people were, there were going to be young people, even children there who may have just started their education, who were living there, apprentices and such. And so the people began to grow angry at these rumors, and again, blame came on him. This is why some of the misfortunes happened as well. He's in league with those clerics. He worships Delovian, the god of magic, as all mages do. This is one of the elder gods. He too is in league with this betrayal of you and causing your woes in this land. He's the reason why things are bad. We're so glad the children of the night are here to redeem us and save us from this type of evil. Well, sure enough, as was expected, enough grumbling and rumors spread until the people themselves, the group, grew angry. And they, along with key ranking members of the church, marched upon Luthien's tower to have him arrested or brought to justice or to answer for the so-called crimes that had been brought up against him. Luthien appeared on the balcony of his floor and told everyone, you know, to come down here and be arrested, don't fight, give it up. That's what he's hearing. And he's like, you're all fools. You don't see what's happening. And these children of the night, these worshippers of a goddess that doesn't exist, will only be the death of you. People came in and tried breaking into the doors, tried breaking into the tower, and Luthien cast a powerful spell, forcing and driving everyone back about 15 to 20 meters from the tower. So almost like a shield, but a force of energy that pushed people away, and it glowed brightly, which, again, people, very bright, so on and so forth. And they cast this spell as a kind of like a dome around his tower. He then yelled out a curse stating that no one was going to enter his tower, that he was done with these people, the lot of them. I'm done with all of you. If you want to sell your souls to these heretics, so be it. But I will have nothing more to do with the lot of you. But none of you shall have the treasures that are in my home. And with another quick casting of a spell, black thorny vines began to grow from the ground and began to crawl up the sides of the tower, wrapping and twisting until the tower itself was primarily encased, not all the way. Like, you can still see the bricks through it and such. Maybe a little bit of a window, but it's foggy. You can't see inside, dark inside. So, you know, it's kind of vines all around it and such. Luthien, as the vines began to take over the balcony, stepped back inside and was never seen nor heard from again. The children of the night, of course, were furious. They wanted what was in there. That was why the clerics they were telling the story believed they wanted access to the artifacts and the magical items. He was a very old mage. He'd been around a long time. He had adequate power. You know, there was some stuff in there that was kind of juicy, and they wanted their hands on it, but they'd been thwarted. The vines themselves stopped growing, but they didn't move, and they were solid. They became unbreakable. They couldn't do anything to break them, and they were covered in thorns, thorns so sharp they could rip through a man's skin. And nothing that they could do could break or even chip or scratch these thorns. They tried for years to get in, using everything that they could, even magic. But no one could breach the spell to get inside of Luthien's tower. And over time, it just became forgotten and left alone kind of as a remembrance to the old days, if you will. Oh, what's this here? Got a question. Okay. Like I said, a few times since then, mages have popped through town, much like clerics, but they don't usually hang around long, and most leave of their own volition. They get that feeling, hey, I'm not welcome here, and those who hang out a little bit too long suddenly go missing as well. Sorry, need a drink. Okay. So that was kind of from that point on, the children of the night basically ruled the land. While there's the Senate, and the Senate makes the laws, the Lord of the Night, the head of the temple, of the entire religion at this point, his word will sway them in pretty much any direction. Very rarely will they go against the church, whose guards outnumber even the city guard. Now, the children of the night have temples located around the nation in all three of the main cities, as well as some of the smaller towns and hamlets. Their primary stronghold, though, was Knight's Keep, which was located a little less than 2 days' travel away towards the northeast. Okay? Now, the keep in all actuality was originally a fortress. It once was a castle where the old kings of Sevalence is the name of the country, where Sevalence resided. So the old kings. Now this is centuries ago. They haven't been a king. They've been using a senate and that type of thing for centuries at this point. But many, many hundreds of years ago, there was a kings that ruled this land, and the kings lived in that castle. Children of the Night moved in and rebuilt part of it up and turned what the ruins and such into a new home and basically a fortress, a place to defend, although they claimed it to be just lands that have been consecrated and were holy, and where they were easier for them to reach the goddess because of its connection to the night. There's a whole storyline to it. And people are like, okay, well, we didn't have any use for that land anyways. No one lived there, so cool, that's all right. So it's been heavily fortified and rebuilt partially. Again, it's a big place and they're still working on it. So there's always construction going on, much unlike most interstates. Interesting. The leader of the Children of the Night, or the Church of the Night, was named Mason Zangara, and he normally referred to as his title as Lord of the Night. Mason was known to be a very charismatic man, and he claims to speak for the Lady of the Night, their goddess, directly. So he's not just saying, I pray. He's saying, she speaks to me. She speaks her will to me. And my job as her chosen is to pass that word out to the rest of you so that we all might benefit and receive gains and blessings from following and heeding her word and by giving her prayers. And you guys are doing such a great job of praying to her. She's talking to me even more. She's real happy. Keep up the good work. That kind of thing. Tithe more if you love the church. Sound familiar? So things like that. But he'd been one of the first, and he's been there, and he's been their leader for a very long time. Now, the church's Templars are well trained, and while technically are not part of the city or the nation's army or guard, still act in that function very commonly. Any sort of public punishments, especially executions, are performed by members of the church, either like a Templar specifically designated that, or in a really high case, one of the clerics themselves. They color it, if you will, I'm doing this so that I can help their soul move on. I can give them a last blessing, give them a chance to recant, save their souls, to give in to the Queen of the Night, and then when we kill them, there's a chance they can still move on to the heavens and such. So they do that role in a way that the people are thankful that they do it. They make it seem as a service helping out. And while executions are not regular, they are unfortunately not super rare either. And for those who are watching patterns will notice that people who speak up against the Children of Night have a bad habit of committing some form of crime, there's some more of those air quotes, in the near future that would cause them to be imprisoned or executed, or in some situations, saved. Oh, now what does that mean? Well, if they're saved, that means at the last minute realizing the truth of the clerics of the night, the children of the night, realizing that they have betrayed the Lady of the Night and willing to dedicate their immortal souls to serving her, some are forgiven and then transported to Night's Keep, where they will serve out the rest of their days, making amends and serving. Now, none of them people are ever heard from again, because, now they're off living a life of servitude and holiness and monk stuff kind of things. And people just don't question it, because you don't question things around here. That doesn't go well for you. So it becomes accepted. So if someone is taken to Night's Keep, they are not usually ever seen again. Now that's someone who's committed a crime or something of that nature. Someone who goes to Night's Keep because they joined up, want to be a Templar or clear something, that's different. They'll go there, receive training, come back. I want to clear that up. It's people who go there for those other reasons that are never heard from again. So, all right, where did I leave off here? So there are still a few Templars in the city who worship the old gods. These are people who live everyday normal lives. People don't know they're a Templar, but they are loyal and they help these group of clerics move around, stay in contact, and work towards the greater good for the people as much as they possibly can. So there are still a few of them that they can call upon in times of need. They don't openly, they're not going to rush out with a sword and a tabard on, saying, yes, I'm a hero, I'm here to help, but they can be counted on in times of need to assist. Now, one of the last things that they learn is that Vanessa has learned that the Lord of the Night, Mason, has returned to the city just several hours prior to this meeting. He was not supposed to return yet, but they believe that words of Artis and her friends arriving had reached him, and he'd cut short his trip to Night's Keep to return quicker. That, of course, he didn't give any real public reason, but that's what Vanessa believes. Vanessa and the other clerics also state that now that they are little heroes, our group, cannot be walking around the street openly anymore, and it's going to be hard for them to walk around hidden, because one of them is a Maeve, who's a big old Minotaur, and the only Minotaur in the entire country, to their understanding. So Maeve is sore thumb, sticks right out there. She definitely limits their ability to move around. It is something that the original group of Darshan, Dandy, and Mercy ran into a lot of times. Minotaurs, while great characters, man, they bring some negatives to the party. It's hard to be sneaky with a Minotaur, unless you got a chest of holding, which these folks do not, right? So they recommend, hey, this place you're in right now, it's kind of a dingy room, but it's safe. It's warm-ish. It's dry. There's room for you here. You can even light a small fire in here. You don't want to let it go for too long because there's no windows or anything, but it is a big chamber, domed. You could light one up. Plus, we're underneath one of the shops, right? That's how they get in and out. We can bring you supplies much easier, so we can bring you food and drink and things, and you can move in and out easier through that. Not Maeve, but everyone else, if they need to, for some reason needs to leave, you have that option. But they'll be safe there. The companions agree there isn't any other better place they could think of where they can stay hidden while they work on what's moving next. Now, The clerics spent hours discussing the history of Haven's Crest, how the Children of the Night operated, and the layout of the city. That's important. They had maps. They laid out the city, said, here's where these type of businesses are. Here's where this is. Here's where we have allies. Here's areas we know to be dangerous. They're giving them a crash course to know as much about the city as they possibly can. Artis and her friends listened intently, asking as many questions as they could, hoping to find a clue that might help them. Finally, it came time to plan moving forward. Everyone agreed that it was imperative that the people be shown that the true gods exist and that they had not abandoned the people. How that could be accomplished was the challenge. Artis could easily cast a spell to show her god-given powers, but it would need to be in a way that was public and undeniable, right? I can't just cast a wimpy spell. Children of the Night say, yeah, we can cast spells too, even though technically they're not clerics. They do have some magical abilities, and these clerics don't know where that comes from, but they're saying we're sure it's not clerical. But we need you to something big, something bold that will say, hey, you are a chosen of the god, and you are here to help the people. So we need a big event. We got to figure out something in that way. They all agreed that they would need some additional information to plan their next moves. First, they needed to know how the Children of the Night were handling their disappearance, right? Because there were Templars who were watching them, and then suddenly they were gone. Children of the Night are going to be unhappy that these people are missing somewhere in their city. To everyone else, it's just going to look like people disappeared, right? That happens from time to time. So first they needed to know how to handle the disappearance. Next, Rand wanted more information on the layout of the temple. Rand's like, listen, I have a feeling that if we're going to face these people, if it ever comes down to push to shove, it may have to happen in this temple. We may have to go there and attack it, or whatever the case may be. We need to know the layout of it, and we need to get as much information about how they operate, their numbers, and how that building is set up as we possibly can. So he talks to the clerics. He's like, I need some local clothing, something that we can use that I can disguise myself, that I could then move around the city more freely, and I can find this information out. Because he can't tell them what he wants them to find out, because he may not know until he sees it. So together, he and Kip agree that they're going to go ahead, they're going to sneak, they're going to dress up, disguise themselves, and sneak out, and go to the church and find out what they can of the layout. They're not clerical, they're not magical, so they're less likely to trigger any type of things searching for clerical magic, right? Because if Artis and them have disappeared, you can assume the Children of the Night are looking for them. They're going to be looking for the clerics. Rand and Kip have nothing that would trigger that stuff at all, as long as they leave what few magical items they have back with them, back with their friends. Now, this itself, being disguised and moving around in disguise, is an area that Rand had been trained by his father, and like his sire, Rand could easily lose himself in a crowd. So, Rand has been very thoroughly trained in the art of disguise and how to blend in and how to be hidden in a crowd. Rand never questioned this. He grew up thinking, this is one of the things I need to know to be able to serve my queen and my princess and protect Serenity. He does not know that his father is basically the head of the spies of Serenity that go other places, that his father himself, occasionally when he goes on missions, isn't just regular stuff. He's sneaking in somewhere in disguise. Quan does that. So Quan has been raising his son in many ways to take his place one day. Even though Rand never really understood why this was imperative that he know it, even though he didn't see anything that any of the other Knights of Serenity ever used this, never questioned his father. His father knows best. I'm going to study it. So Rand is very skilled at that. And then Kip himself is a rogue, has some natural skills in that area as well. Remember, the dude's like over 100 years old. It would be much more difficult for Artis or Maeve to move around freely, so it was agreed that their appearance should be saved until they were ready to make a big move. So Artis and Maeve are kind of stuck in this room, not being able to do much until they're ready to make a big action. I'm interested in the mage, said Petal. This Luthien was someone who worried the Children of the Night. Perhaps with good cause. If I could find a way to get inside of his tower, or maybe contact him, we may gain an important and possibly powerful ally. Tilden reminded her that many had tried and failed to gain access to the tower over the years. Also, since he was never seen again, it was assumed that he'd left long ago through his own magical means. Teleporting, gate spell, some type of artifact. It's assumed he locked up his tower so no one could have his stuff, and then he ported off to live the rest of his life and never looked back. Still, Petal would not be dissuaded, but she did agree to wait until after dark and until Kip and Ran returned from the temple. Kip volunteered to go with her, saying it was best that none of them be out alone. Petal agreed and thanked him. So the next day's plan settled, they broke off to set up a camp. The other clerics departed as well, promising to return with supplies and to check in with any information they can get. Tilden was the last to leave. I cannot begin to describe what your help means to us, he said. I'd begun to lose faith we'd ever have a chance to save our people. Now, thanks to you, we may finally have a way to fight back. Left on their own, the heroes discussed all they'd learned that day about their information in the city and their own situation. They'd become entangled in something much larger than they'd ever expected. They were forced to accept the fact that to help these people likely meant losing Seraph's trail permanently. As much as they hated the thought of abandoning their friends, they could not in good conscience turn their back on these people. As they finally drifted off to sleep, each of them felt the weight of the responsibilities they'd taken on. It was as if fate had brought them here, and they accepted that challenge. So like, something brought us here for a reason. We accept that, and so we're here to take care of whatever needs, even if that means we're never going to catch up to Seraph. I mean, they were traveling blind at this point. They hadn't found a sign or word of him in a long time. They only knew he was heading east, so they headed east. For those of you keeping track, he's much further to the north, and while he is continuing east, he is much further east than they are at this point, because they keep getting stopped in things. He did too, but they've really had it. So we jump to the next day. It was midday as the two cloaked figures lined up with the crowd, waiting for their turn to enter and give prayer in the great temple. There was a light drizzle of rain, which benefited them greatly, allowing them to keep their heads covered without standing out. The temple was beautiful, and clearly one of the newest buildings in the city. Built from stone and a very dark wood, it stood at stark contrast to the more plain and dull-colored buildings nearby. Ran and Kip slowly made their way through the great double doors with the rest of the crowd. Well-armed and armored Templars stood near the entrance and at key locations within. In fact, Ran could see there was an unusually high number of them compared to any of the other temples he's ever visited. Even Serenity, which itself has a higher than normal Templar count. Serenity gets involved in a lot of stuff, and that temple keeps getting attacked. They are well guarded. Once inside, they could see the main chamber was quite standard in design. Wooden pews sat in rows facing the altar at the far end. There were sections on each side where sat candles, some lit and some waiting. Like many religions, lighting a candle for a lost one, lighting a candle in prayer. It's a standard part of this religion as well, and so there are areas for that. The altar, at the far end, was beautiful, if not a bit unsettling. There was a large carved female form made of a dark stone neither Kip or Ran recognized. Its face had little detail, yet the statue was adorned with golden jewelry and a golden crown, giving it the appearance of a jeweled shadow. So not onyx, but very black. Imagine it was just the silhouette of a person. I would say it's a female form, but akin to like the Oscars. You know that little statue you can win in the Academy Awards, that little gold statue. It's the shape of a dude, but it doesn't have all the details. It's just, you just see a bit of a nose, but there's really no mouth. It's kind of that design. It's clearly female. It's got the female curves and such. And it appears that it would have long hair. But there's no details to the face. The hands are clasped in front of it, but they're not individual fingers. It's just kind of like a higher bump where the hands would cross. So it's a very smooth type of statue, but still clearly a female form. And it has a large golden crown made of real gold. There's gems, pierced earrings, necklaces, probably some type of maybe golden and silver chained, well, it'd be gold and gemmed, like almost like a cloak kind of thing. So you imagine that wrapped around, it looks like a shadow wrapped in jewelry. Trying to give you an idea of what that looks like. Talking about that, I lost my spot. Here we go. Yep. Symbols of moons, stars, and comets decorated everything. As the torchlight flickered across them, it gave the feeling of walking through the night sky. So the stars and very space, so that she is the statue is the central point as the Lady of the Night. It's very much of a night sky. It's very dark inside. When you pass through these double doors, you then go through a thick curtain. So I almost said carpet. Curtain. And then so there are some torches and candles, but it's pretty dark. It takes a minute for most people's eyes to adjust. So the lights, when they do flicker off, all of these things that have been polished to a shine, gives a little bit of a flickering sky kind of feeling when you're inside of there. Overall, the layout of the public accessible areas were pretty typical of most temples. It was easy to see that there was a lot more space not available to the public based on what they could see versus the actual size of the building. So they're looking in like, okay, here's the big room. Here's the places people can come in for the whatever it is. But when we're outside, this building's twice as big as that. So there's a lot of building there that the public's not allowed to go to. Now, some of it be where the Templars live, some of it be where the clerics live, private studies. I'm sure they have a library of some kind, maybe a private prayer room, a school. All of those type of things are back there, but the average public person can't just go walking around back there. You would have to have special authorization to pass the Templars to get to an area like that. Here we are. With the amount of guards and the crowd of visitors accessing those around them, with the amount of guards and people all around them, it would be very, very hard for them to access those areas unseen, especially during the day. So they're like, there's no way for us to sneak out of these rooms into that back rooms because there's just too many people here. Someone's going to see us do it. And there's guards at every door. They've got it well guarded. Playing the part of people visiting the city from a distant farming community, they were able to get quite a bit of information from the citizens. So they're playing it off, the two of them, like, oh yes, we're from a farming town really far away. And the other clerics, their allies, would have given them names to use. Maybe places on the border, places where the children of the night aren't very often, there's no actual church there, where they wouldn't be, it wouldn't be surprising to say, oh, someone's coming here to visit the city for one reason or another. And of course they want to stop by the temple because they're still loyal even though they live way out there. But no one around here really knows anybody from that town. So that's kind of the cover story that these or any of the group are going to use whenever they're walking around the city in disguise. Now, in that type of way, you know, they're sitting with other people. Maybe they sit down in a pew next to some other people and like, hey, we're sorry to bother you kind of thing. We're new here. We're from so-and-so town. It's our first time visiting the city in our whole lives. It's such a beautiful place. We wanted to be here. When's the next sermon? How often are there official prayer times? And they're getting all this information about schedules and the people and what people know. And of course, people are very proud to show off their knowledge. They want to be overheard by clerics. Like, here's someone spreading the word. They know these things. So again, an easy way to get information from people. Suddenly, about that time, a hush came over the crowd, becoming only low murmurs, and all eyes looked towards the altar. The Lord of the Night had arrived. At first glance, he was not a remarkable-looking man. Average height, but scholarly thin. What I mean by that is traditionally, in this type of thing, your wizards and your librarians are the thinner type of, because they spend all their time reading books and not out getting lots of exercise, lots of muscle. So he's scholarly thin, not unhealthy thin, but what you'd expect from someone who spends all the time praying and studying. He was mostly naturally bald, with what little hair he had left a light gray. I like to say he's rocking a Picard. So Star Trek Next Generation, before he got a bit older, he had that little hair around the backside. I don't know if there's a name for that haircut, but he's mostly bald on top with just a little bit of fuzz on the sides over the ears, kind of thing. It's like a light natural gray. It looked like he's probably in about his mid to late 50s, to give you an idea of the age. He had a large smile and stopped to shake hands and speak with the citizens as he passed. Still, something felt off. The two men casually and carefully moved closer to him through the crowd, wanting to get a better look. So he hasn't come to give a speech. He hasn't. It's not time for a sermon, but he has come in to spend some time with the people. Right? Good leader. Artemis does that. People show up at the church. She pops in now and again and has prayer time and says hi to people and so on and so forth. Mark of a good leader. As they drew near, they could hear he had a smooth and confident voice, clearly experienced at public speaking. Okay, here we go. I missed a spot. There we go. Yeah, okay. So he was going through and he's shaking people's hands and saying hello to people and saying prayers, that kind of thing. Suddenly, the Lord of the Night looked up into the crowd and locked eyes with Ran. Ran could see it then, the coldness in those eyes. While he may be smiling, there was no light in his eyes, only a darkness with a touch of hatred. Now, I'm not trying to say the man's a vampire. Let me clear that up right now. It is well known that this guy has appeared out in public in the daytime. Okay? I know that's where everybody's first thought's going to go. That is not the case. He attends public things outside while he's the Lord of the Night, still goes out in the daytime. Bald head to the sun. Doesn't disappear or die. So unless he's somehow a vampire that's immune to the sun, which, that's to be looked at, he's not a normal vampire for sure, not just a vampire. He does not give that off. The coldness I'm talking about is more in the demeanor and the type of person he is. He's smiling. The smile looks natural if you're just looking at him. But if you really are focusing on him, you'll see that there's no laughter in his eyes. It's cold and it's got a touch of anger or hatred. Like he's angry that he's having to do this. Like, hi, I'm pleased to meet you. Hey, let me kiss the baby and so on and so forth. But he doesn't look, that glimpse of he's doing it because he has to, not because he truly is happy doing what he's doing right now. Give a better description of that. It seemed like the Lord was about to say something to Ran, when a large gentleman, a farmer by the looks of him, stepped between them, begging for a prayer for his only cow, a sick cow that he owned. Smiling, of course, the Lord of the Night took the farmer's hand and made a quick prayer on his behalf to the Lady of the Night. When done, the farmer was elated and thankful, shaking the Lord's hands vigorously. The Lord of the Night then peered into the crowd as if looking for someone, but Ran and Kip were already long gone. It was late into the evening and Petal was ready to leave. Ran and Kip had returned hours earlier, sharing their experience in the temple. There was a concern that somehow the Lord of the Night, Mason, had somehow recognized Ran, though how that could possibly be, they don't know. They've never met him, to their understanding, and Ran and Kip didn't recognize him. And they were pretty well made up. They were pretty well, disguised. So, it would have been something special for him to recognize him. Kip was still disguised, and now so was Petal, playing the part of his daughter. Same scenario. They're from that town. They're visiting. Traveling with a child they hoped would draw attention away from them. Because let's be honest, not many people walk around with a little kid when they're out committing crimes. Some do, but it's not normal. So he's walking from place, my daughter and I are going to returning to a family member's house where we're staying at because we're visiting from out of town, right? That type of a thing. And here's a little girl, here's him. They both have slight elven, because he's half elf, she's a Kender, half Kender. They have that thinner, obviously they're wearing hats or hoods or something to hide their pointy ears, both of them. But they still have enough elven-ish kind of hawkish look that they do, sometimes do have a bit of a look-alike. They do kind of appear to be of relation. So they can pull this off. Maeve was worried about letting them go alone, but Petal assured her they would be fine. After all, the two of them were the best prepared to escape any type of a chase. Which is true. If they're being chased, they're the most agile too. Ran's pretty good, but Kip and Petal are going to be able to be jumping and hiding and slipping and sliding way better than anyone else. If anyone's going to get away in a chase, it's them. Not feeling particularly comforted, Maeve had to agree. Artis took a moment to remind them not to take any unnecessary chances. The two of them were also the most likely to get themselves into trouble, which is also true. Finally, Volos arrived to lead them to the Mage's Tower. Volos is one of the other clerics. We learned his name last time. So he arrives. He's going to be their escort to that tower. He knows where it is. He's going to be traveling with them, also playing the part of a relative. They're coming to visit him. He'll be able to say, oh, yes, we're going out doing it's late at night, and we're returning to my home, which is somewhere over there kind of thing. It was a relatively short journey and uneventful. Volos had grown up on the streets before becoming an apprentice blacksmith, which is what he was in his day job, and knew how to get there with minimal attention. So he knows the back streets. He was an orphan, young, before he was finally taken in as apprentice, raised. It turns out the guy who raised him was also a cleric. He passed away of sickness years back, but he raised him in that way because he saw the goodness in Volos. A little history on Volos there. Upon arriving, Petal had to admit she was a bit disappointed. The tower was really just a medium-sized two-story building set apart from the others. The roof came to an unusually tall point, but she would barely call that a tower. There was no one else around, so they crept closer. There was little light here, no torches burned nearby or anywhere close, so all they really had was moonlight, and, if you remember, both of them have some infravision. Volos doesn't, he's human. But they both have some limited infravision from their non-human halves. Petal, as they came close, Petal could see the vines covering the building. They averaged 1 to 2 inches in diameter and went from the ground, twisting and turning upwards all the way to the very tip of the roof. Each vine was covered in thorns they'd been told could cut through metal. People had tried to cut the vines, burn them, melt them with acid, and the church had tried magic. Yet nothing had even scratched the vines, nor the building beneath. It was as if the magic of the vines extended to protect the tower as well. Because remember, you can see the tower through the vines, but even it's unscratchable. Part of it's made out of wood. It's not burning. The building was a mixture of stone and wood, much like the other buildings in the city. I was little more than a child when he did this, said Volos. I wish I'd been here to see it. I'm told it was quite the spectacle. What kind of person was he? Asked Petal. You know, before the church and stuff. I remember him being reclusive, replied Volos, yet helpful when needed. He never took on an apprentice. He always said they weren't his kind of mages. Still, he was respected and known to be quite powerful. He was already a very, very old man by the time he did this. Volos motioning at the tower. To save time, Kip and Petal decided that they're going to kind of split up. Kip's going to go clockwise, Petal's going to go counterclockwise, so they can try to study it as best they can. Volos is going to keep watch, because watches do come through here. You know, they still kept the eye city guard, making sure nobody's here messing with this, because last thing they want is somebody to succeed, right? Get in there and get unkept magical stuff in their hands. What kind of problems could that cause? So Volos is kind of keeping watch for any guard to warn them should somebody be coming. Petal studied everything, looking for anything different or that might stand out. So she's looking at the details, getting close. She doesn't want to hurt herself on these thorns, which are big and jagged. But she's checking everything, looking for any sign at all, anywhere, of something different. She was about a quarter of the way around the house without finding anything at all. She decided to cast a spell to try to detect the magic protecting the tower, to find out what kind of magic it was. So she's, excuse me, she's going to cast Detect Magic. Not dispel magic or anything like that. This guy was clearly a powerful mage, and to try to dispel a spell cast by a mage at a much, much higher level than her would be very difficult. Small chance of success, very difficult. And if she fails, there could be side effects. So she's going to cast a spell just to see what type of magic this is. There are different schools of magic, right? Conjuration, necromancy, abjuration, alteration. There are several different types of magic, and knowing what type of magic it is might clue her into the type of spell or potentially a way to get around it or dispel it. Okay? So detect magic, very basic spell. Just trying to learn a little bit about the spell protecting this tower. There's some more finger quotes for you. Petal closed her eyes and held her hands out before her. She began casting the spell, a spell she'd cast many times and was quite familiar with, and as a mage who studies her spells daily, she knew the words in and out. She began to say the words perfectly like she's supposed to. Casting a spell using the wrong inflection and the wrong words can have dire effects. Sometimes it just means it won't work. Sometimes something really bad happens. So she's concentrating, she's saying the words, she's motioning with her hands the way she's supposed to. For those of you who don't know this, when casting a wizard spell, there are 3 types of things, 3 parts of that spell. Okay, there's the vocal, voice, things you have to speak, or somatic. Okay, verbal. Then there's the sometimes you have to do things with your hands, right? You've seen movies where people are crossing their hands, making triangles, and wiggling their fingers and stuff. That requires some type of movement. And then there's the material part. One moment. The material component is if there's a spell component. That's where you get your bat wing, or your bat guano, or your spider web, or piece of cloth from a mummy's foot. You know, sometimes a spell takes all 3. Sometimes it just needs the vocal and the signaling hand gestures. Sometimes it just needs the vocal. This is a spell that, at this point in time, her version, what she's casting, is not going to require a material component, but it does require her to move her hands. This is important. Okay. That's why tying up a wizard's hands is one of the first things you want to do when you get your wizard. Gag him first, then tie up his hands, and if he still looks dangerous, bust all of his fingers. Because you can't make intricate finger movements if your fingers are all crooked and bent up. That's an ouchie, but it's, something you should know in case you in your daily lives are out Christmas shopping and run across an evil wizard with a dragon or something. I'm just here to help you guys. So she begins casting the spell. Things are going like they're supposed to. After just a couple of seconds, though, almost immediately, just within just a couple seconds of starting the spell, she can tell something's wrong. The words are flowing, but then she starts saying words that are not part of the spell. These wrong words start coming out, and she can't stop speaking them. She can feel her hands are now making motions and movements she's not controlling, but she is helpless. She can't stop speaking. She can't stop moving. She's frozen in place, almost as if she's watching herself do this, like she's retreated back into her body, and it's like an arm or a shell around her, and she can sense what it's doing, though she's not in control. The words felt like they were being pulled from her, like something had literally reached into her and was pulling it out through her mouth. And she started to feel like someone when you trip. You trip and you have that hesitation when you're starting to fall forward. She starts to feel that. And her eyes open in panic. The vines before her are moving around like snakes, twisting, almost like water movements. And vines reach out and begin wrapping around her hands, and then her arms, and slowly around her body. She felt no pain, and no thorns cut her flesh, though the vines are wrapping around her, not tightly, not in an uncomfortable way, and though she's only moving very slowly, she still has that sensation like she's falling forward down a set of stairs, if you can imagine that feeling, except it's going super slow. She felt herself being pulled forward, pulled into the wall itself. And as her body began to press against it, the wall became almost soft, liquid-like, as she began to move into the wall. As she was her eyes were about to go inside, she felt a wild magic surge erupt through her, through that spell. So that spell has now triggered wild magic, and she has no control right now, so she can't use any of her training to try to block it or hold it up or try to stop it. And then suddenly, everything goes black. Kip came around the building just in time to see Petal disappear into the stone. Crying out, he reached out, trying to grab her, but pulled his hands back in pain. Blood flowed from the deep cuts caused by the vines that now were back in their original position, as if nothing had happened. Volos came around the building, appeared, warning that a patrol was coming. Looking around, he asked what had happened to Petal. Kip could only growl in frustration. Volos didn't have any time to waste. He grabbed Kip's hand, not realizing it was cut and bloody, felt wet, of course, and began pulling him towards a nearby alley. With no other choice, Kip followed as they raced away to safety. A moment later, they sat hidden in the alley as the patrol walked by. Turning to him, Volos whispered, "What do we do now?" "I don't know," whispered Kip, angrily. "Either way, I'm a dead man." And that's where we're going to stop for today. So right about an hour, which is about normal. Try to keep between an hour, hour and 15 minutes. Consumable length, if you will. I'm very excited. I got to do some writing again. It's been far too long since I got to share these. The way I'm looking at the Mergedworlds schedule, some episodes will be live like this. Some of them are going to be pre-recorded. I was going to switch all the way to recorded, but I think it's going to be a mixture. It's going to depend on a couple things. Especially now as we're getting close to the holidays, sometimes it's going to be hard to be here live at specific times. So by having kind of a hybrid between live and pre-recorded, is going to allow me to put these out on a more regular schedule. So I can do a live one when I have time. If not, I can try to pre-record it so I've got it ready to go. I did it today on a Thursday. I know it used to be Tuesdays, but because my work schedule has changed, I used to be off Tuesdays, and so I dedicated the whole day to Mergeworlds. Now I don't have that option. And Wednesdays, I work late. So I believe Mergeworlds is probably going to be coming out on Thursdays or Fridays this month. I'm thinking it's going to be every other Friday starting in January. And then on the off weeks of that, I'm over on Twitch. Right now we're doing some streams over there, friends. So 1 week I'll be Twitch, 1 week I'll be here on YouTube doing Mergeworlds, and it'll alternate. Okay? But I would like to thank everybody who came by and watched this, and everybody who watches this in the future. Thank you all the comments asking me, hey, when's it coming back? Hey, I'm ready for the next part of the story. Hey, it's been too long. Where the hell did you go? I really appreciate that. I'm sorry it took so long for this episode to come back out, but I'm in a spot now where things are really good again. All of the drama that's hit me the last couple months is behind us, and so now I can start focusing on putting out regular content again. So I'm very excited to do so. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please put some comments down in the comment section if you're watching this later on YouTube, or leave a review on iTunes or Spotify if you're listening to the audio podcast over there, or you can join my Discord. We'd love to have you there as well. We have Mergeworlds threads where you can ask questions about this or Dungeons & Dragons theme stuff. I'm always happy to chat D&D. For links to my Discord and all my socials, you can go to my website, Onlydraven.com. Okay? But that is going to do me for this episode. Again, thank you very much for hanging along with me all this time and letting me continue to tell this story, even with this big hiatus. I appreciate you all very, very much, and I'm excited to move forward and tell you what's next in the world of Mergeworlds. All right? Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you have a great day.